Hello. Today's walk from Blackthorpe Barn is going to be guided by me, George Agnew, and my dog Bolly. And we're going to go and have a look at Rougham Church, at the Lich Gate round there. We're going to head on up to Kingshall Street and come round past some meadows and loop our way back to the barn. This walk, I think, takes about an hour and a half, so it's not one of the shorter walks, but it's not particularly challenging, even though it actually has a couple of stiles with a meadow which could have cattle in it, and so that's basically the issue for anybody who's nervous of cattle might think that this walk wasn't for them. I can't guarantee there'll be any cattle in the meadow, but I think every time you go through a meadow, you have to assume that there will be cattle and operate accordingly. I'm just trying to untangle my lead from Bolly, and now off we go across the car park to start our walk. Bolly loves smells, always wants to stop and smell everything, like any dog. Hello. And so here we go across the seems like the endless wastes of this car park when there's nobody here, but it actually only takes a minute or probably half a minute to get across here. One of the features at the moment is that the blackthorn is coming out into flower, which I always think is a really lovely moment in the spring, in the late winter period. And I'm afraid I'm notorious for talking about a thing called the blackthorn winter, which is basically that when the blackthorn comes into flower, almost invariably we still have cold weather to come. And here is some blackthorn now, not one of the finer examples, but you can see it flowering. It's beautiful white flowers before the leaves actually the leaves are starting to appear now, but basically it usually flowers on the bare wood. You can see it here, and so when you see the blackthorn, enjoy it, but also don't put your hat and gloves away yet, because there'll still probably be some cold weather. And I believe the forecast, even though we've been enjoying some really mild weather, even though that's the case, I believe that there is some cooler weather to come, shall we say, and we'll see what happens. In fact, the snowdrops are appearing throughout the wood now. Here, this is the Downs wood, which features in so many of these walks because it's conveniently located near the barn, and so it sort of takes us off at the beginning of many walks, not all, but quite a lot of them. And it quickly gets you away from feeling you're in a car park. What else can I tell you about this? Here's another little bit of blackthorn ahead of us. Very scattered blossoms on there. Lots more snowdrops all over the place. I often wonder how they get here. Whether people have planted them, thrown them away, or what. There are all sorts of different varieties, so I haven't looked at them quite closely. And there are double ones and single ones and tall ones and short ones. Lots of different sorts. We've had a lot of rain recently, and so there's quite a bit of mud around. I'm wearing my boots, as I usually do on these walks, and I think there'll be one or two moments when I should be really quite glad of them, even though a lot of the time you could probably manage with just a stout pair of shoes, but I really wouldn't recommend it. So we're turning left, as we always do on these walks, and here come some people the other way, enjoying the walk coming the other way. there, dog. Hello. Always have to be a little bit cautious when you pass other dogs if your dog doesn't know them, because you never quite know what might set a dog off, and suddenly you have a bit of an altercation going on potentially. It was okay then, but I could see the hackles on the other dog had come up, and Bolly doesn't actually know that dog, so never really quite know what's going to happen. But we got away with that. But it is one of the reasons why I think it's terribly important that everybody keeps their dogs on leads. We're now negotiating some mud here because of the wet weather. We have had the most incredibly wet weather recently. Loads of areas flooded that normally don't have any water at all. Meadows near the barn looking like lakes at the moment, even though they're actually very, very thin sandy soil, because the entire aquifer is flooded, and so the water is taking a long time to get away. But of course it's so, when you get into the summer and it's all hot and dry, and I think back about wet times in the winter and I think, oh, that sounds wonderful. All that water everywhere, everything so green and lush. Of course, at the moment, things are only just beginning to think about coming into leaf, so not everything is green, but everything is well watered, I can certainly say. And that is a nice thing to think about when later in the year it's all rather dry and everything is shriveled and parched and waiting for rain. These days, with climate change, we seem to get into these cycles, don't we, of a longish period of one thing and then a longish period of something else, rather than a little bit of this and a little bit of that, which used to be a feature of the weather around here quite a lot. Sadly, not so much now. What I tend to say is we get just as much rain as we ever did, but it just comes in different sorts of amounts, and so we get a whole load of rain and then a long period of no rain, whereas you would historically have had a few days with it and a few without, and that sort of thing. We're getting into the second half of the Downs Wood now. There are all sorts of trees in here. Sometimes when I look, I see trees I've never noticed before. And there's a tree there that looked rather like a plane tree, to be absolutely honest. Not sure if it was. I shall have to investigate that later in the year. But I think part of the nature of this bit of woodland and this area is that it was part of the parkland of the original Rougham Hall, which was built in 1680. And so there are fancy trees around the place which either appear in the middle of a field. There is a plane tree, it really is a plane tree, in one of the fields around here, which is a magnificent specimen and clearly must have been part of the original park. And here we are closer to the hall probably than that tree, so it wouldn't be at all impossible that this also is a plane tree and another parkland tree. Another bit of mud here. On we go. Bolly will be pleased to discover that we're going to be turning right at the T-junction at the end, which is the way he always likes to go. Having said that, you may find him turning left, but frankly I'd be surprised. Let's watch, see what happens. No, round to the right. It's the way we go when we're going on longer walks, and so he always hopes to do that. heading to the edge of the wood now, and we can begin to notice the wind getting up. I expect it was blowing while we were in the wood, but of course we were sheltered in there. Now we're coming out and it's quite drafty. I'm out of my hat, scarf really. I think it probably suggests that the weather already is changing a little bit from the unusually mild stuff that we have been having. Rougham Church is beginning to appear on our left front through the hedge, and we're going to be going up past the church, as I mentioned earlier, so we'll have a good look at it later on. We have an environmental cover strip on the right here, which is intended to provide habitats for all sorts of wildlife, particularly insects, and so it's left standing long to enable things to carry on living there. We try to instigate as many of those sort of things as we can fit in around the farming. Farming obviously has to be economical, but we're always keen to try to balance it with whatever we can do to make the environment work better. Hope you can hear the running water. After all this rain, the ditch along here is really running at the moment, and I just love to hear it. Land opens up here and you begin to get a view across. See woodlands in the distance. There's a road with a van going along about halfway along with a tree-lined road. Lovely old oaks. In front of that you might just be able to make out the fact we've just planted a hedge. Very proud of that. That went in about a month ago. Part of a programme of hedge planting this year. We're planting 1.2 kilometres of new hedges this year. They're all native hedges with a mixture of hawthorn, blackthorn, probably field maple, maybe Guelder rose, things like that in it. There are already oaks growing in this line here, so I don't think we're planting any more oaks. There are already, I think, 31 oaks growing along there. So that's more than enough. Even though one has to accept that there will be losses, you know, when you plant these sort of things, that you have to expect possibly quite substantial losses if there's a very hot, dry summer. You could even lose the entire planting programme. But let's hope that won't be the case. Here we come to the bridge, where we're going to be turning left. And you can see the water flowing through, which is lovely. Absolutely magic, listening to that. Morning! And then on the other side of the bridge, the water flowing through before it gets quite so rushed. Now we're turning left and we're heading up towards Rougham Church in the distance. The old hedge line here with new bits of planting that happened a few years ago interspersed, and the crop behind the hedge there and on the right is a crop of rape. It's the stuff that has the bright yellow flowers when we get to about May, and is used to make oil, cooking oil, and it features increasingly in our diets. And in the Roots Cafe we try to use local ingredients as much as possible, and so rapeseed oil from East Anglia is part of the contents of dishes as often as it can be. Clearly it doesn't suit everything, but it is actually very good. Cold pressed rapeseed oil is a lovely thing, and we should all be enjoying it as much as possible. Following a couple here with their white Labrador Retriever. I think we're all going at more or less the same speed. Try not to overtake them because it's not very good when one's trying to film. Interestingly, here on the left, looking in through the hedge, because it's also bare at this time of year, you can see the bank that is the dividing line between the fields. And here we are really on the borderline between fields that need ditches and fields that don't. So as we walked along the field at the bottom, there was all the water rushing down through that ditch line. There you clearly needed a ditch. Here, a little bit higher up the side of the bank, up the side of the little tiny valley, there isn't really any need for a ditch, so there's just a bank. And the hedge is planted on the bank. I dare say maybe there was originally a bit of a ditch here, but it really doesn't. It's not needed. Rougham Church is approaching now. Tower, such a feature in the landscape. When I come out of Bury on the A14 heading east, heading home, I can see it on the horizon, and I always know I'm approaching home territory. It's been here for such a long time, probably since about 1400, so that's quite a while. We'll pan round a little bit, enjoying the view. Our walk today will go past the church on the way out, and then we will approach it but not actually go past it on the way back, because we're trying to find varied routes on these walks, and I'd like to show you something new every time. So we've got a bit of variety going on here. Approaching Rougham Primary School, which sits nestled next to the church. I think originally it was the workhouse. It's been a primary school for a long time, and it's a really, really excellent one. They're on half term at the moment, so it's quiet. It's not the usual shrieking going on from the playground, which one usually gets when we come along here. Having said that, I just hear some children shouting. So, am I perhaps wrong? I have to say, having no children, I'm not very clued up about half term and things, but I was under the impression this was half term. Walking through this little car park. Usually gets full of potholes here. It's usually in a terrible state. We've recently helped put some material into some of the potholes. Never lasts for very long. Right there, here on the left is the spinney, which will be the feature of another walk. Through this gate here we'll be doing another time, but today we're going to cross the road and we're going to go left. So you can see Rougham Church ahead, and we're going to be walking along this pavement past the War Memorial and heading towards the Lich Gate. This really is, I mean, many parishes have buildings like this. This isn't unique in that sense, but it is very, very lovely. And a lot of money and effort was put into making this thing happen. I'm going to have a little look at it. So here we are. It's all carved along the front. Isn't that beautiful? These leaf carvings along the edges of the roof. And a picture of crucified Christ in the middle, and then I am the resurrection and the life written on the front here. We're now going to go and have a little look on the back. And somewhere here it actually says the name of the person who built this, and here it is written in enormous letters, so big I couldn't see it. In memory of Morton Shaw, rector, 1854 to 1901. And again on the side there is beautiful carved leaf forms and a wonderful, wonderful oak. And what we have here is a couple of lovely seats. So I'm just for a moment going to sit down and have a little rest. I don't really need a rest at the moment, but it's too good an invitation to miss. There's the church, the view from this beautiful Lich Gate. Absolutely lovely. What a treat. Ollie's keen to go on, so I think probably we'd better head on our walk. So out we go beyond the Lich Gate, back on the route we were on, but this time we're going to follow a footpath round to the right. So this is a different route now. And there's some more blackthorn hanging over the path. It's really a very good year for it this year, probably because it's been so mild. It's encouraging it to flower properly. The path we're on, amazingly, is actually tarmacked. And it's part of the effort to link Kingshall Street, which is one of the main residential bits of Rougham that we're heading towards now, with the church and with the school, probably mainly, to enable children to get to walk to school, not have to be driven. I'm not sure how many people actually use it like that, but it's a wonderful asset to have for the community. It's a lovely, solid walk for anybody, but do be aware that because there are a lot of tree roots growing underneath this thing, as in so many places, you get the, see if I can show you here. Here's a tree root coming across the path, there's bolly going across. And things like that can be a bit of a tripping hazard if you're sailing along here, not looking where you're going, thinking it's all lovely and smooth. Anyway, now we have a line of poplar trees. Here we've discussed poplar trees before. These are hybrid trees that were planted for the matchmaking industry back in the 1960s, which then all disappeared after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the availability of softwood, cheap softwood timber from Baltic states and Poland and places like that. So these trees have just grown on and on and on, getting much bigger than was ever intended, becoming features in the landscape just about at the same time as they become hazards, because they were only ever intended to grow for about 40 years. They've now been growing for quite a bit longer. The bottoms tend to rot and then they suddenly come over. We've removed a lot around the estate, and we do have a program of removing all of them. A lot of people find it hard to understand what we're doing because they just see them as a beautiful thing in the landscape, which they of course are, and I love to see them too. Our plan always is to try to leave a few. Whenever we fell an area of trees, if there's been a plantation of, say, conifers mixed with oaks or something like that, or just conifers even, which is part of the old forestry system where you would have what's called a clear fell, cut everything down. We don't really do that anymore, but where we're dealing with systems of planting that are based on that, we sometimes have to do that sort of thing. But what we do now is we leave groups of trees of the previous the previous crop of trees or growth of trees in the wood. We'll leave them as a sort of a relic of the previous thing. We're now just going to nip across this little bit of field and have a look at the pond here on the left. See if there's any water in it. Ah, yes there is. I'm very pleased to see that. This was dug out a few years ago and part of our pond restoration program. And so here we've got a pond full of water doing just what it should. If you notice on the side over there, there's not a lot of trees growing. We cut down a lot of poplars around here. This was all covered in poplar trees, which sucked out all the water and completely dried up the pond. So now it's growing back, and that's really, really lovely to see. Ponds, of course, around here are a source of water for drinking water for animals and birds, as well as being an environment in their own right. Really, really valuable thing. I don't know whether you can hear the wind, but it's certainly blowing a bit now. I think the old Blackthorn winter is maybe coming back into action quicker than I was anticipating. First day I've worn a scarf for a while. And the weather forecast is that weather is going to go back to normal for the time of year, rather than this exceptionally mild weather that we've been having. There's a wonderful bit of ivy growing in the hedge, and you can see all the evergreen leaves on it, providing shelter for birds and food sources from the berries. And then bramble, doing much the same thing. And now, as we head on down this pathway, in the distance you can begin to see the houses of Kingshall Street, which is, I think probably you would have to say, the nearest thing Rougham has got to a village centre. There's a lovely shop at the post office and an excellent pub called the Bennett Arms. And there are quite a lot of houses here by the standards of the village. You see flooding in the field on the left, just little patches. But that's all part of the rain we had recently. And another feature in the landscape here, one that people are not normally that keen on seeing, but very, very functional, is a line of pylons. These are actually, I think, some of the earliest pylons which came through the area, providing electricity, I suspect, from Ipswich Power Station, which was, I think, a coal-burning power station, supplied by ship, I dare say, and then there would be the power coming through here. Always amazes me how they managed to get all the pylons such a straight line. I know people don't like to look at them, but they are really rather necessary if we're going to have electricity. Unless we're going to bury everything, which, lovely though it would be, I can't believe will ever happen around here. So there are the pylons going off in the other direction, heading for Bury. And we carry on our walk. Slight bend of the path. Houses of Kingshall Street beginning to appear a bit closer. And any minute now we'll see Rougham Church in the distance behind us. Right, I think if I turn around now, more or less underneath this power line, you can get a view. There's the church and there's the hedge line that we just walked along. And here on our right front is some more new hedge planting, which is really lovely to see. This literally went in a few weeks ago, and it's going to help to join up this path so that it will be effectively lined with the hedge all the way, providing all the wonderful benefits of environmental corridor for wildlife, shelter, and something beautiful in the landscape. These trees were planted quite a few years ago by our then farm manager Simon, who put a lot of effort into doing these trees. Some of them didn't survive. You see there, this is what you get quite often. You get losses in droughts in summer and that sort of thing. But this is all part of the nature of life around here. So this tree's fine, next one's gone. And then I think 3 are okay, and it looks like a couple of losses. But this is all part of building up a landscape for the future. We're approaching the houses of Kingshall Street now. These are quite newly built houses, I think really rather nicely designed. And a couple of estate cottages over there, which are from about 1900. On a practical front, as we approach the end of this little bit of footpath, there's a poo bin on your left, which could be jolly handy if you've got a poo bag about your person. There are several of these dotted around the village, and also we have one at the edge of the Blackthorpe Barn car park. Now I should point out that this bit of road here, we're coming to, crossing us from one side to the other, is quite busy. Not at the moment, but often, so do be careful. Now we're going slightly right and then left through the hedge, so that's a very, very short walk down the public road. And then here we go through the hedge, and on we go further along this path. Wind getting up again, making it feel more like the sort of February day that it is. Houses on the left, we respect their privacy, so we won't be filming them at all. But Bolly is rather interested as usual in the smells, and have to try to balance giving him his walk with not spending our entire time standing around waiting for him to join us, shall we say. The problem is when I walk him normally, I just stand and wait for him to be ready to carry on. So he's rather used to that. Bolly is nothing if not a bit spoilt. Kingshall Street really rather lies in the middle of the village, or probably towards the southern end of Rougham actually, and the landscape is sort of changing as we continue down this way. The soil becomes more clayey, and I can sense it as we're walking along here. We have a look at the path here where Bolly's running along. Muddy still, but it's a different sort of soil now. It's more clay in the soil, and that will stick to your trainers if you're wearing them, stick to my boots, but that doesn't matter. I can get that off afterwards. But it is just something to be aware of if you're going to come on this walk. Sensible footwear is really essential. We walk up to the end, this bit ahead of us, there's a rather bright green hedge, and at that point we'll follow around to the right. It's a crop growing in the field here, which I think is winter wheat. More mud. Not masses, but just enough to be a bit of an issue if you're not prepared. When we get to the end here, we swing round to the right and follow the path round the edge of the field. There's a puddle of water there, which will go eventually. So we've swung around to the right and then going around to the left in a moment, just following the field edge as we go. Mud's not getting any less. Makes one quite superior to be wearing the rifle. and then swing round to the right here, just briefly. As we're now walking actually parallel to the public right of way, which we shall be joining in a minute. As we go along here, you can just see on the left a little path that goes through. Now, you have to imagine in the summer this is all much more grown up, and what's now terribly obvious that you just walk through here might be rather more obscure, but it's literally just a few meters. And now we are on, if I swing round this way, you can see the path going that way, and looking round this way you can see it heading to the right as we approached it. Hedgeline now on our left, and we're now walking, having been walking effectively south on most of this walk, we're now walking west. Here's the field opening, and another field lies before us, and in the distance you might be able to make out another row of pylons. You have to learn to love them, I think, if you're going to live around here. We have lots of things here. The field on our right. Bolly is having a good old smell of something, so we'll give him a chance to have a smell of this one. Right, Bolly, what are you doing there? Come on, hurry up. Not everybody wants to watch this. Come along, on we go. That's goodbye. It's interesting doing these walks at this time of year because I don't come on some of these walks that often, and this one I did last summer when I was writing up these walks. Initially I was investigating them, and so I would have been coming along here with a sun hat on and sunglasses and maybe even in shorts, good lord. And now we are following the path. There's a hedge line on our right, and continue to walk along here. Nothing like so muddy now. There's a bit of grass growing across the top, which is holding everything together. Another environmental strip on the side here. And the hedge line coming up ahead of us. I think we're shortly going to be joining a little lane which is running left, right across our front. You can see the opening in the hedge here as the path runs through to this little lane. Oh dear, that was a bird scarer. This makes me jump slightly. There will be another one in a moment. Bolly doesn't seem to mind them, which is good. We go through here, you can see there's a hedge and there's a ditch. which I'm afraid to say has got some rubbish in it, which we probably need to get cleared. And now, if you look here, look to the left and to the right, this is what we're now going to walk along. So we're now on a little tarmac road, which is a public right of way, but it's also private access to a house at the end, and several people live along here, so we need to respect their privacy and avoid the traffic. Here comes the postman. Delivering something or other. So, makes my point that you just have to be a little bit alert and keep your dog on a short lead along here. One or two very nicely little built houses along here. It's really rather pretty. Nicely designed. And then behind it, magnificent in all its glory of newly thatched, we've got a lovely cottage. Doesn't look at them too closely. There, and now we're going to head on down the road here, which is going to take us into some meadows. A few potholes appearing in the road now, so pay attention, don't trip up. I probably isn't likely as anybody to fall flat on my face, so I need to pay a little bit of attention here. And ahead of us, we're coming to the public road again, which is going to take us, this little thing we're on is called Oak Lane, and then the road we're coming to crossing us in front is Moat Lane, and we're going to go straight across. You can see the little bridge, so there's nothing coming, but you have to take care along here, and then we come to a little bridge followed by a stile. And the way this works, as you probably remember, is we go look to the right here and you can find a flap that the volley can go through. Quick, through you go. And then what I do is I grab the lead on the other side of the fence, and then I negotiate the stile myself, using the handle to get securely over. And you've got Bolly on the lead, you never need to take him off, and everybody's got through the stile. So we now have a little bit of a meadow here. This is one of the moat meadows. Rougham Church beginning to appear in the distance on our right front. There's another meadow and another one beyond, all part of Moat Meadows. And so this is the sort of place that you could find cattle. There was a water trough behind us, obviously to provide drinking water for the livestock. And these fields are all fenced to try to contain livestock. And you can see here a shallow ditch running along the edge of the field, which is carrying water downhill down towards the north. odd saying down towards the north. We think of the north normally as up, but it's certainly downhill. And here we've got a hollow tree. This wonderful wildlife thing. All sorts of things would be living in there, enjoying the protection that's offered by a tree like that. I'm quite wet along here. I'm glad of my boots. And this little vestigial ditch along here is doesn't normally have water in like this, so it is quite wet, and I can see where we've been planting hedge plants here in the past. Their little spiral guards are still on them to protect them from being eaten by rabbits. They're helping to thicken up this hedge line. And here we come to the second, this stile bridge combinations which we have on this walk. There's a good view of the stile here, and you can see the little thing on the right for the dog to go through. So I'm going to try and get Bobby to go through this. Well, look, come on, we're going to go through this thing now. You lift it up. Oops. Through you go. And then grab my left hand. And then climb over. So that must all look a bit alarming. And then we've got some steps leading up onto a little bridge with water running through. And then over we go. On our left front is the Rougham playing field, sports hall, and the beacon, which gets lit from time to time. It was actually commissioned by a man who was a blacksmith who used to work and show at the Blackthorpe Barn craft fairs. And his name was Mr. Capes, I can remember. I can only think of David Capes, but I'm pretty sure he was some sort of weightlifter. This chap was not a weightlifter, even though he was pretty strong. So this, I think these beacons were all instigated for the anniversary of the Armada in 1988, and that one was originally on the edge of Rougham School, and I can remember it being lit on one occasion, actually by my mother, and it was all a bit of an event. I can't quite remember what occasion that was, but subsequently to that it was felt that it was more appropriate to have it here on the playing field, where all sorts of events happen, and so it was moved here. I think it was last lit for the Diamond Jubilee, when there was a big party on the field here. We all sat around and had picnics and things like that. Now, there's one of these pylons I keep talking about, and beyond that, to the right, Rougham Church beginning to appear again. More lovely oak trees on the left, each of them showing signs of being pollarded long ago. You can see hollows in the tree, which we find wonderful wildlife habitat. Petals of the blackthorn actually lying on the path here in the edge of the field. Amazing. It's almost like something in Japan. Now there's a path going off to the left here which we will not be following, and you can see some sheep beyond that. They're grazing off one of the cover crops that we planted earlier last year. And on we go, heading on our walk. We're now heading north, for anybody who's that interested. And here lies in the hedgeline a huge hulk of an old oak tree. You can see the way that they rot down. It's amazing. The colours, the cracks, the shapes. It's like a wonderful sculpture. But in addition to that, it's also, of course, home to lots and lots of things. So that's wonderful. And we would never dream of clearing that away unless it was blocking the ditch. In which case we might have to pull it to one side. The great thing with these great big trees when they fall down or they lose limbs is not to clear them up too much, because the rotting material of the dead fallen limbs really should be piled up around the base of the tree and become all part of the continue as part of the system of the environment around the tree. This walk is getting a bit drier now, I think. I think that we're getting away from the clay which we were beginning to encounter further south. And we're getting back towards the slightly sandier soil, which makes it easier to walk, less slithery. Probably see at the end here we've got another little bridge, but probably you'll be glad to hear no more stiles. Now it's a little bit of a challenge to pay a bit of attention when you're going over a stile. We'll get a bit closer to the sheep here, have a bit of a look at them. It's always a fine sight, seeing sheep in the field. Here they go. Not our sheep, but they come here in the winter on their holidays. I think they'll be quite shortly being moved on to another field. Doesn't seem to be very much left for them in that. Though we always put food out as well. There are big bales of straw, which is the sheep actually eating from at the moment, which extends the time they can spend on the field. So we've just crossed this little bridge, and now we're going to turn right and head down this hedge line and back towards Rougham Church. We won't be going right up to it, but there's rather a fine view of it across this little bit of a valley, which we're going to enjoy in a minute. There's a pond on the left front, which we inspected on a different walk, also has water in. And these hedgerows and these oaks, they're just so lovely, aren't they? In the distance you can see a line of the remnants of a line of the poplar trees, which I keep wishing on about. And they will be going before too long, and we will be replanting along there with a line of something else, which will have more of a future. The question will be, will it be oak trees, or will it be something that might be more able to survive into the future with climate change? We will have to make a decision quite soon about that. There on the right front, you can see a whole row of them, these trees. So it's always a bit of an issue Historically, we've always planted oaks. In most places where the poplars have gone, oaks have gone in. And I suspect what we'll probably do is put in a mixture to cover various options. There will be oaks, but there will also be maybe sweet chestnut or lime, and maybe as a nod to other suggestions, we might do something from another part of the world, like hickory. Now we're just going to go and have another look at this pond here. We've got an opportunity to have a little look at it at the moment. This pond was completely surrounded by poplar trees, and it had no water in because the poplars sucked the water out, took the poplars away, and hey presto, the pond came back. We had to cut some other things down on the south side to let the light in, but it's a lovely environmental resource, and in the distance you can see through the other poplar trees, you can see Rougham Church. So now we'll go back onto our walk. It's the Rougham Church ahead of us. It's West Tower. Gradually emerging from behind the branches of these oaks. But we're not actually going to go up to the tower this time, because I'm trying to achieve a bit of variety on these walks. We're actually going to be turning left at the moment, going along the bottom of this little tiny valley. We can see the church here, sitting in the landscape magnificently. And now, as we prepare to turn left, I can see an oak tree, young oak tree, planted in a tube as part of the preparations we've already been making for the felling of these poplar trees. And so there's another tube with a tree in it, a couple of poplars, and then another tube. In fact, they seem to be quite successful, these tubes. They're oaks, right, they all seem to have got an oak in them. So we've already decided here what we're doing, and it's going to be the traditional oak landscape. We could always interplant with something else if we felt appropriate later on, because these are usually at 20-metre spacings, which allows for the occasional loss, but it does also allow you to interplant, if you really want to, with something else. Yes, these oaks all seem to have survived, which is really good to see. And there's water running along the ditch at the bottom here, which has been, I'm sure there is, yes, there it is. It's all part of that same ditch that I keep looking at further down, where you can hear the water running. We're continuing to head north. Get more oaks in tubes. These tubes were invented by a Forestry Commission research scientist called Mr. Tuley, and so in the old days they were all called Tuley tubes, because I was around at that time. In my head they're always called Tuley tubes, but actually there are lots of different makes. These ones I think might be from a firm called Tubex. There's a little bit contentious now because of course they're made of plastic, and single-use plastic is not something we should be using if we can possibly avoid it, but they work so effectively here and the environmental benefits are so good that they really outweigh the disadvantages we feel. There's another one, also living tree in it, and I think we've got 2 losses here, that whole row, and then a tree at the end. Now you might imagine that what we're going to do is to walk straight across the edge of this field into the path on the other side, but there's actually a ditch which in the summer is quite tricky to get over because of the growth of stinging nettles and brambles and all sorts of things. And so what I'm going to do, even though I can see that you can get across here perfectly well this time of year just there, is we're going to walk up the end and do what you do in the summer. Because there's a field entrance at the top here by the edge of this little bit of woodland. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually cross there. This little bit of woodland ahead of us was actually where the hospital was for the airfield, and it's locally known as Hospital Corner, even though I think its official name is Kiln Grove. So now we're going to be coming out onto the public road. Definitely a moment for dogs on short leads, and turning right, here comes a lorry, dust cart I think, so we're going to have to wait for that. It's a fine demonstration of why we need to have dogs on leads. And now we go on the road just for about 100 metres. In the winter you can just walk across that ditch, which I could have done perfectly easily, but you wouldn't thank me if you were doing this in the summer. I have tried myself and it's not very easy. So we go down here, public road, Rougham Church again, on our front, right front, and then very shortly now we're going to be turning left by another red poo bin, which is an excellent landmark for where we're going. And then we walk along here, which again has got oak trees planted along the edge, which seem to be surviving. Again planted by Simon, who was then the farm manager. Did a lot of work doing this sort of thing, for which I'm very grateful. The entire community should be, really. Setting things up for the future. Comes somebody coming the other way. There's a dog. Morning! Come on, Lolly. Polly rather likes greyhounds and lurchers, and whippets, but you never really quite know, and I certainly don't want a dog fight on this film. Right, as we go along here, you begin to see some remnants of a previous planting scheme, probably from 20 years ago. Bigger trees, but not huge. A few of them survived, but we had a lot of losses that year. So that's why we keep going in and doing it again and again. We gradually build up an uneven age structure of hedge lines, tree lines. fairly shortly now, we're going to be actually rejoining the path we set off on earlier. This ditch on the right with water in it flows under a culvert. That's a sort of farm bridge thing. And on the other side, it meets the route that we walked earlier. And I can see another dog coming along here, probably on a short lead. Dog looks very excited. It's going on to a lead, which is probably a good thing. And you can see the tunnel the water goes through here, which is actually a remnant of the old Rougham Hall from 1660. So it's a really, really old little bridge. Hello. All encounters. That's exciting. Right, now we are crossing back off our old path. There is the stream flowing along the other side of the culvert. A lot more battered on this side, the other side looks quite intact really. It's late 17th, early 18th century brickwork. We've now got the wind behind us, which I have to say is much nicer. As we walk along, it's pushing us gently along. Being pulled by body and pushed by the wind. I mean, what could be better than that? I hardly need to make any effort at all. A few houses here on the left front, which are part of what's called the Downs. The wood ahead of us is called the Downs that we walk through as we go to it. And the trees are named, the houses are named after the wood. It's getting a bit stronger, I think. I'm sure it is a change in the weather. We have had the most absurdly mild time with temperatures, daytime temperatures of things like 15 degrees, which for this time of year is absolute nonsense. Of course, you get used to it after a bit and take it for normal, wandering around without a coat, that sort of thing, and then suddenly realise you've got to put it all back on again. Sound of running water. Hardly call it a waterfall, but it makes enough to make the sound of running water. On we go. Walk is coming to its close really quite soon as we approach the Downs Wood again. Downs Wood, which features on so many of these walks. Lovely spot. Fixated by this water. Absolutely. Such a delight to see it. Of course, we've got much too much at the moment, but it's all flowing away and it'll be gone soon, and then we'll be wondering why we moaned about it. Approaching corner of the wood now. There's actually a footpath here on the right which goes along the field over there. That is the official footpath. The way we're going is not actually the official footpath, but it's where almost all of us always walk, and it makes complete sense to me, and so we will be doing that again today. Here we go along here, and then looking out for the little turning on the left, which is coming up, clearly marked by the mud. Here we go, and this is our route. Follow, again this way. Come on, here we go. There's paths like this do keep changing their route as things blow down. This used to be a much straighter bit of path line than it now is. See, there's somebody coming the other way. It's rather narrow here, so I think he's letting me through with Bolly. And then we'll pass. This is the muddy bit. Quite muddy. See all the fallen trees here on the right. Wood looks different as you go in through it. In the other direction, you see things quite differently. These bits of dead wood suddenly much more conspicuous going this way. In the old days, that would have all been cleared up. It's thought to be terribly untidy. Lack of management. But now we know better. Well, we think we know better. Bird song. Lovely to hear. It's more sheltered, of course, now we're in the wood, which is also a nice thing. You can see here how this trunk is almost red. Well, it's really quite red, and the next one is quite grey. All different colours. All different colours. You gradually attune your eye to things when you walk around a place like this. You're looking at things. There's a clump of bracken. Bracken is a marker of different soil types quite often, and so a little patch of that could be an indication that there's something going on. Often you get a patch of it on heavier land where there's a little sandy stream going through, sandy seam going through, and this time of year it's not so obvious, but a lot of the bracken's not really very visible at the moment. In the height of summer, you can see these great swathes of it going through bits of woodland. Hollow tree trunk, which I'm very fond of. Some birch trees, a splash of white in amongst the darker stems. Birch, of course, native tree. It's what's called a pioneer species, which means when woodland starts to grow in an area, it's one of the first things that appears is birch. And you get thousands of birches coming up, perhaps aspen, alder and birch, and then gradually the oaks coming in behind. And the birch trees don't live for that long. Again, frustratingly, they only live for perhaps 60 years, then they come down, but they leave thousands of new ones behind. So it's not as if they're disappearing or endangered. They're actually a wonderfully rich environmental asset. Second only probably to oak in the landscape. And so even though the trees themselves are never that old, they're going through this much quicker life cycle. Short coming up to the spot where we turn right, where this gentleman ahead of us has just done with his dogs. With a little patch of mud just here. Ox growing on the left. Holly on the right here. And back to the snowdrops. Singles and doubles. The oak tree with the great big scar at its base. The fairy doll, which is of course just an old wound, maybe dating back to World War II when there were a lot of people living around here, and there were probably trucks and things driving around here that used to bang into the trees from time to time, I would guess. That lime on the left there, with all its suckers coming up. Air raid shelter. Obviously World War II. What we'll do this time is we'll just walk on a little bit, give this gentleman a bit of privacy. Morning. And second area shelter appearing here on the left. That's the opening. And then ahead of us the tarmac road which links us through to the barn. Blackthorn in flower on the left again. And here we are at the Blackthorpe Barn car parks. We're nearly at the end of our walk. Seems to be a bit of traffic. Customers for the barn, I hope. Some of them are estate staff, I can see, doing some jobs. Meadow on the right here, the right of the car park, which is very, very light soil, has been flooded for days as a result of all this water we've had. It's beginning to disperse now. I can still see vestiges of it, but mostly gone. Barn beginning to appear on our left front. convenient poo bin, anybody needing that. And then the barn appears ahead of us up this pathway. So this walk comes to an end after about an hour and a half. That's not an unreasonable estimate of the time it takes. We will just come up to the end here. We traditionally do on these walks, survey the meadow and the barn. And so here we are again. Hope you've enjoyed the walk. Thanks.